Continuing now with the Factors debate coverage, as mentioned, the CNBC moderators were very provocative with the candidates.
You know, let me say something at the outset. The questions that have been asked so far in this debate illustrate why the American people don't trust the media. This is not a cage match. And you look at the questions. Donald Trump, are you a comic book villain? Ben Carson, can you do math? John Kasich, will you insult two people over here? Marco Rubio, why don't you resign? Jeb Bush, why have your numbers fallen? How about talking about the substantive issues people care about?
Joining us now in Miami, the purveyor of BernardGoldberg.com, Mr. Goldberg. Now, interestingly enough, that was a brilliant answer by Ted Cruz. But what was even more brilliant was how he didn't answer the question he was asked and launched into that. And the question was, hey, Congress is going to pass a budget, all right, so the government won't be shut down. Are you going to try to stop it? And Cruz didn't want to answer that question. No way, no how. So he launched into this brilliant soliloquy of, you bunch of pinheads, you're all biased. What say you?
Well, yeah, he did, and it's not a bad strategy, actually, when you have a Republican audience. Look, I have said, and I have written, that liberal journalists will always salivate more when they're going after Republicans than when they're going after Democrats. And tonight, we saw the latest example of that. I'm all for tough questions. I have absolutely no problem with tough questions. I've been a journalist a long time. I hope I've asked more than a few of my own. But the tone was snarky, and John, what's his name?
Harwood.
The NBC, Harwood, John Harwood in particular, who also writes for the New York Times, was smug. Ted Cruz, in that soundbite you just played, was absolutely correct. This is why the American people, or a big chunk of the American people, don't trust the media. Marco Rubio was correct when he said, in effect, that the mainstream media is in cahoots with the Democratic Party. Bill, they simply will not, they don't have the passion to go after Democrats the same way they go after Republicans. The very first question tonight, the very first question, what's your greatest weakness? That set the tone for the rest of the evening.
I like that question, though, but what I didn't like...
not as the first question.
No.
Not as the first question.
But look, you want to change it up, you want to mix it up, you want to get them off their rehearsed talking points, and that's a way to do it. So I'm not going to come down on them for that. But what happens is that these moderators, they have meetings, and we have to lay this out for the folks. I'm going to take you behind the scenes. So for a week, the moderators at CNBC are meeting with their so-called superiors. All right?
Right.
And they're hashing around the questions. Well, should we do this? And we'll give this to Rubio, this to Trump, this to the... I mean, the comic book thing to Trump, that's no accident. They knew they were going to do that. All right? So my question is the same one I asked Krauthammer. Is the management at NBC, all right, dictating that you guys have to try to make them look bad? Or is it just their individual consciences that compel them?
There's no conspiracy, but it's not their individual consciences. It is the product of the mainstream media. It's groupthink. They don't go into a room, give the secret handshake and the secret salute, and say, how are we going to screw these Republicans tonight? It doesn't happen that way. This is just their mindset. And when they came up with these questions, and you're absolutely right, they sit in a room, they meet, and they come up with their questions, what didn't occur to them was the cumulative effect of their questions, the overwhelmingly negative effect of their questions on how that might sound. You know, maybe they were trying to impress each other with who could ask, a more provocative question of the Republicans, and there were some legitimate tough questions, so I'm not against that. But in its entirety, it just came off as I use the word snarky, and I'm going to stick with it.
All right, supercilious, condescending, words of the day. But it helped the Republican candidates because
absolutely
quickly they seized upon, hey, The audience already hates these people, and they're actually boos at some of the questions. So now I don't have to answer their questions anymore. They're marginalized, and they can ask me whatever I want, but I'm going to ask, and they did. The Republicans didn't answer some of the questions, direct questions. Oh, no, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but here's what I want to talk about. See, I would never permit that. That would be not permitted.
Well, no, but you're absolutely right. You will never go wrong figuring that the Republican audience, the Republican Party, Republican voters, whatever you want to say, will always have a tendency to not trust the mainstream media. That's the tendency.
Right.
But, you know, I've written about this extensively, and they have every reason not to trust the mainstream media.
Absolutely. History is history.
And then they get this tonight, and they say,
just reinforces
see,
it.
This is why we don't trust the mainstream media. And the audience, as you say, the audience loves it.
I thought back to Newt Gingrich, South Carolina debate, CNN, open marriage question.
John King.
Yeah, and Gingrich knew it was coming, hit it out of the park, won the debate, won the primary in South Carolina. So these people are never going to understand that they actually helped the people that they loathed. Bernie Goldberg, everyone. Next up, Williams, then Crowley, Hume, and Baer ahead.